Hey guys, we are still at the devcom where developers from all around the world showcase their new games or talk about their most recent project. One of those speakers is my next guest, Margherita. But before we get to know you a little bit better, I want you to introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Margherita, aka Megs. I was the lead producer on Season, Letter to the Future, an indie game that was released this January worldwide. I've been in the industry for more than 17 years now. Started in testing, localization testing, back in 2005. And I worked on AAAs. I was at Ubisoft for almost 12 years. And after my project at Scavengers Season Letter to the Future, I now moved in VR, and I joined Survios to release the next Aliens game on VR.
So you are a lead producer at Survios. Let's talk about your role as a lead producer, because many might not know what a lead producer does. Could you give us a quick insight? What are your tasks?
Yes. So as a lead producer, what I try to do is to support the team as much as I can. I come from an expertise, like many people that started in the industry. My expertise was localization. So I come from a discipline. But what I really learned throughout the years is to make sure that I can help people do what they do best, and trying to remove as much as possible of the obstacles that we face every day in game development. So I actually got a question yesterday asked, like, what's your day look like? Well, what I do is that I talk to everyone as much as possible. I try to be the person, a go-to person for everyone on the team, so that if I can help them with anything, clarify any concerns, clarify dependencies, that's what I do. Obviously, I also work on schedules, planning, but my focus as a lead producer specifically is to ensure that we have a clear long-term strategy for the release of the game that we're working on. In indie, I didn't have many producers with me, so it was me and the production manager that I was overseeing. Now at Survios, I have producers that I mentor, that I coach, and back at Ubisoft, when I was an associate producer, I had production managers that I would manage, and they were directly under me.
All right. Our next question would be a trip into your past. Why did you choose to work as a lead producer? When did you choose, and how did you become it?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I started in testing, which I love. Like, quality assurance was my first job in the industry, and I learned so much. It's the best, well, it was and it still is today, the best way to understand how games are made. So I did it for a few years. Then when I moved to Canada, I joined the Game Loft, and I started working as a translator. But I also started managing teams. It was my first managerial role. I was coordinating the work of other translators. And that's when I started getting interested in managing people. So when I got at Ubisoft in 2009, I started working as a localization manager. And I didn't have necessarily direct reports right at the beginning, but I was working with so many studios around the world and vendors. And what made me really interested about managing people is creating opportunities for the team to be effective, that I manage directly or not. I loved the fact that my ability to create opportunities for them to be effective could make the difference in their day-to-day and the way we were making games. I started managing teams with the intention of creating viable production ways of doing things. And this was actually the reason why I went to work on Season, because I wanted to prove that production of video games can be viable if we just think about the methods and the processes that we use, and we do it with the intention of making the life of developer easier every day in and out.
So is there any chance of a way to study those things, or how did you get into the role or your first start with it?
Yeah, so when I started, there weren't necessarily many courses you could take in managing game developers. So I, like many people at the time, as I did, just learned from the experiences of previous managers, different projects. AAA is great for that because you have access to many brands, many projects, many teams. There is a lot of legacy, so tons of learnings that come from decades of experience. And there is really a lot to learn just by observing people and, seeing how projects are shipped. What I wanted to do, though, because it felt we were always rushing and always trying to fight against all odds on projects, I wanted to see if things could be done maybe better by studying methods or techniques that they come from different industries. So I studied, I took night classes at university while I was working during the day to learn about project management in general, learn how to plan, how to schedule. And then I took some certifications. I took the PMP, the project management professional certificate, to learn about how it's supposed to be done, the theory behind it. And I was trying to apply that every day during my day on projects. I was trying to see if there was any methods that I could apply directly to help my teams. What I felt it became, like it was a great foundation, and I think it's a great foundation to know how management has evolved over the years. I think that agile methods were the ones that I found the most applicable for me in the industry. So I went and took also certifications in Agile, which is something that is very common now. Many managers try to learn about Agile methods. We talk a lot about Agile. We have sprints, we have rituals, a lot of terms that you will hear about on a developer floor will be Agile terms. So I wanted to know what those terms were about because we were talking about it all the time on the floor. I'm like, okay, I need to know what those are. So I went to study that. It was really interesting. It's also shows that, not everyone would actually go and study those, but we would just nitpick what they wanted to be able to use Agile practices on projects. So I want to say, like, I learned what I wanted to learn, but what I found important to me was thinking critically about processes and methods that worked for us. I always told the team that I worked with that processes and methods need to work for us and not the other way around, meaning that if there was something that didn't work for us, it wasn't making us more effective, then we didn't need to use it. In my years, what I did was developing methods that I felt could be useful for teams, but always thinking about the team first and how they would make sense for them.
All right. You mentioned in the beginning that you are in the industry for 17 years now, and I found out that you worked on over 30 games. This includes very popular franchises like Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, Prince of Persia, Starlink, and that's just to name a few from them. In these games, you also had different job descriptions.
Yes.
For example, you were associate producer, production manager, project manager, all these different job descriptions. Where are the differences between them, and could you learn something about it, from it which you can apply nowadays as your job as a lead producer?
Yes, definitely. So I think I was very lucky in my career progression. I started in QA, learned a bunch of things about how games are made, worked with a lot of the different disciplines. Then I moved in localization as project manager. And service disciplines like localization, audio, VFX, those are all disciplines that come later in a pipeline of game development. And what I found super useful for me to learn from this disciplines is that if you don't want to arrive too late in the production, you really want to learn how things are done before, so that you can better manage your deliverables. So I worked for the majority of my career in service roles, and I got to learn a ton about how other pipelines work. Because in localization, I was working with anything that had to do with text of all sorts, from VOs, from voiceovers to text in game, UI. So I would talk to every discipline, every core discipline on the team. And for me to be able to ship on time, I had to make sure that I could plan accordingly to what they needed to do. So I got exposed to many disciplines that way. When I was working in outsourcing and in co-dev, I also got opportunities to work with other studios and coordinating like large mandates. So in my career, I evolved, I think, in the right way by getting exposed to a lot of disciplines as I went through. And I also was able to experience different size games, from mid-sized games to AAA. So I could see how things are supposed to work in a smaller setting, a smaller project. I mean, medium-sized project in AAA is still a very big game, like Shaun White Skate, Shaun White Snow, Prince of Persia. More linear, more like medium-sized games, I would say. So I learned how those projects were done before I went on AAA. So when I went on AAA, I was like, okay, I've seen how it's supposed to be. It's just bigger now.
So you were prepared for all the tasks that come to nature.
I was better prepared. I want to say I was fully prepared, but I was better prepared. Yeah, so the differences in between the different roles is that even my evolution in the industry allowed me to see smaller teams, larger teams, and then multidisciplinary teams. So as a as a project manager first, localization project manager, I was working with vendors around the world. I was working more in collaboration with the teams that I was depending on. Cinematics teams, UI, game design. So we were working together in collaboration. And when I moved in production management, which was by the time I started on Assassin's Creed Syndicate, well, I already knew many of the pipelines that I had to manage, and I was able to quickly get into the role and be able to support the teams that I was working with. Actually, funny thing is that on Syndicate, I started working with the art team, which was a team that I never worked with before. Because with localization, I experienced literally every team, even programming, except art, because I had no dependency on the art team at the time. And I was like, okay, well, it's a new team. I go back to the basics. So I learned the art pipeline by sitting down with the leads, with the experts, with everyone on the team. I'm like, okay, tell me what you do every day. Because now I need to understand how the art pipeline works. And I need to understand it from the expert. I need to learn from the expert. So I literally sit down with them. I'm like, tell me like if I was a 5-year-old, because I don't know anything about our pipeline. And at the end, I realized that all the pipelines have tons of things in common. So my ramp up was easier and faster because I'd already experienced so many other teams before. And every time I started to focus more about the people and a tiny bit less about the processes. because I felt that, well, I worked with very experienced teams all the time, but like they knew what they were doing. They were the experts. I wasn't going to say, oh, we should do this instead of that, necessarily, because they knew better than I do the ins and outs of the discipline. What I was able to bring, though, was asking questions that they weren't thinking about. Made them think about dependencies, make them think about who's coming before and after you. What's at the end of the road? Like, how can we prepare ourselves better for all the phases of productions that are coming, and making sure that we don't have to rush everything at the end. And I think I was useful for that. Because of the experiences that I had with so many teams, I had a good sense of what could come up during the different phases of production, in closing and shipping, and now with live and post-launch. And so production management, specifically for the team in art and outsourcing, was extremely useful for me later on. When I work on Starlink, I was one of the main managers on the floor for the content. And because I had touched so many disciplines, I could already, I felt comfortable help the teams produce multidisciplinary content. So on Far Cry 6, I was now associate producer. I was helping all the services teams in world building. And there is where I really, really focused on the people. I had production managers that I was coaching and that I was mentoring. And for me, it was very important to help them become as autonomous as possible. So I would say, my job is done when you don't need me anymore, right? And it means that I did my job and that I did it well, because now you don't need me anymore. And that's what we did towards the end of Far Cry. The teams were running as effectively as it can be on a production where, a lot of things change all the time. But the production managers were confident in being able to lead their teams autonomously. And so I felt that it was time for me to try something else. And that's where I moved in the indie scene, because I wanted to see if I could apply all the theories that I had learned over the years, all the thoughts that I had in my mind about, oh, if it was me, I would do this instead. So I tried it out. I got an opportunity to be the only producer on a project where I knew everybody, right? It's not projects where, as much as I love everyone at Ubisoft, we were so many people on a project. We were 300 on one floor or two floors in the same building, but about 1,000 people, I'm not even joking, around the world, everywhere, all different time zones. So it's great, you feel part of like a big family, but I wanted to be able to know everyone on the project.
It's a little bit difficult with 1,000 people.
Exactly. I wanted to be able to have one-on-ones with everyone on the team and say, okay, how you doing? How's it going? And I was able to do that in the indie scene and really loved that, because we were all in it together, right? There was not okay, I'm just responsible for this part and I don't know what's going on in the rest of the game, because we're so many. So this, like every project, every team, good and bad experiences, all of it was at the foundation of what I tried to do on Season and the Scavengers, and that I'm bringing now in my new company, Survios, to try to really be of service to developers and help them be the best that they can be.
We come later to season, but before we going to talk about your role as part of the quality assurance teams.
Yay!
Because you work for games like Chess Master Live, WWE SmackDown vs. Raw
Yes.
2008, Elder Scrolls 4, Killzone Liberation, and much more.
Yes.
So someone definitely recognized there's many different genres.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, which genre is your favorite in general?
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm a narrative person. I love stories. I enjoy experiencing stories, especially in games. So, and I'm a huge fan of JRPG. So my favorite IP is Persona. Huge fan of Persona 5. I played it many times. I mean, it's over 150 hours of gameplay, and I played it more than once because I really enjoyed it, and the story was so rich, and you know, the whole way. I'm an anime fan. I enjoyed, you know, the deep, complex stories that you can see in anime, and to me, Persona 5 was the best mix between the two. So I would say that's my favorite genre. But for sure, like any narrative game would be something that I would be interested in. Like any game that has big story, interesting characters, that would be my go-to for sure.
So you are playing Persona 5 at the moment, or any other narrative game, or what is your current game you are playing?
So I had to put it a little bit on the side in the past year. When we were shipping season, it was very busy. I also have 2 kids. I'm married to 2 kids, so there is a life going on as well. But the thing is, Persona 5 still managed to grab me in. So when I can, I go back to play Persona 5 a little bit. But now I'm trying to experience as well. I was suggested to play Baldur, so I'm gonna try that when I come back from Gamescom.
Yeah, it's definitely narrative, and you got so many hours in front of you if you're gonna play it.
Yeah, I know. That's
what I heard. I didn't play it, but I heard it's very long.
But that's the thing. Like games nowadays need to fight for the time of people. Everybody's super busy. Everybody has so many things to do, and that's what's the most difficult. And especially for the indie scenes, it's not Baldur's Gate. Well, this Baldur's Gate, but being in competition with so many games at the same time, for that 1, 2, 3 hours a day that you can catch from people, it's really hard. And I feel that it's really hard to catch my time as a player. So definitely, like games that can do that, it's incredible. So I wanna see it, and I'll let you guys know.
What I also found out is that you are mainly a console gamer, and I was wondering if you remember what your first console was you played on, and if you remember which game it was.
So I don't think I remember what game it was, but for sure, like my first memory with consoles must be Commodore. I remember buying the cassettes at the at the newspaper stand when I was a little girl. I wasn't so much into games back then, but it really was a new experience that got me interested in games. What really happened and brought me into games was testing, actually. So the first game that I ever tested getting up from Atari was on PS2 and Xbox. So that's when I really started, you know, being invested in consoles, and I really feel that now today I'm more console, but I used to play also. I was a big fan of Nintendo as well. I loved the Nintendo DS. I had a customized Japanese console back in the day, and but I ended up being more console player because I really like the immersion that you get when you play a console game. And now with the new consoles, it's getting even more immersive. So it's definitely like a full experience that you can have a console.
If you say you played a lot of games and tested them, I guess you might have a good overview about every console you played on. Which one was your favorite?
That's a really tough question. And I think that I had a favorite at different moments in my personal and professional life. Because I think that there was a moment where certain consoles really shined and really gave their best. So developers were able to leverage all the new features that they were coming up. Like at the beginning of my career was really a battle between PlayStation and Xbox, and we were testing games on both, and even ports on the Wii. Like we had all sorts of platforms that they had their moment. So I want to say there were moments where I really enjoyed Xbox. That's what I had at home. But it was a time that I had all of them at home to be able to try exclusive games that they were just on one console and then on the other. Right now, I have a PS5 at home. I really enjoy the features of the new controller. We were in partnership with Sony, so for a season, A Letter to the Future. So we got a customized controller. It was really, really fun. And I think that the console now, like the PS5 specifically right now, has a ton of features that games can leverage, and it makes the experience way more interesting.
You mentioned season, and that's a good keyword because now we are coming to your panel you had yesterday. Because you talked about how AAA practices inspired the production framework of Season. So, since our viewers might not be here at the devcom, what are the differences working on a AAA title and an indie game?
Yeah, so my talk was about a little bit what I mentioned before. All the theories that I built over the years on game development, I wanted to be able to put them in practice and see if they actually really worked. And the moment that I joined Season, the team was going through different transformations from direction, transformations to the studio was going through some controversial situations in the media. So it was really hard to build the project at the time. When I joined with the pandemic, during the pandemic, the team felt very isolated, very disconnected. Many of us, even myself, when I joined, we were taking roles for the first time. So I didn't know if we could actually pull it off. But what I learned from AAA is the ability to create brands that have very strong identity, and they had production practices that are unique to them. So I wanted to do that with Season. I didn't just want to come in and, work on budgets, timelines. I wanted to do that, but I wanted to, first and foremost, create a brand that could be the foundation for the success of the studio. I really wanted to do that. And I wanted to do that with the team, because the difference, I think, a little bit what I was mentioning before, when you are 50 people instead of 1,000, and that 50 is already a lot for an indie studio, but like 50 people, you know everyone, you know their strengths, you know their weaknesses. You can balance them all as a team and figure out a way to deliver experiences that don't exist yet on the market. So I wanted to do that with Season and create production framework that could help us sustain Season and the other brands that will come after. So in my talk, I basically discuss how my learnings from AAA in terms of framework were what allowed us to create a viable production. I don't want to say we didn't push it, but we pushed a little as we could. considering that we were already late, there was already a lot of work that was done that we weren't sure we were going to keep. Season had a very strong identity. I think that anybody who has seen even a glimpse of Season, either at the Video Game Awards or at the Sony Showcase, or like, wow, what's this? I want to know more about this. And it had a very strong identity. But the actual creative vision wasn't as clear to everyone. So what I could do was bring clarity into that. I brought AAA practices and methods, but mostly, the pipelines, adjustments that we needed to be able to work with all teams, to give visibility to everyone, be aware of dependencies. So that's what I brought from AAA. Obviously, it wasn't 100% copy-paste. It was, as I mentioned earlier, it was about critical thinking. Does this practice make sense for us? Is it too heavy for the 50 people that we are? Are we gonna, is it gonna be useful for us to start tracking everything and then we have no time to make the game, right? So it was a lot about, I actually have a funny slide in my presentation where like, I brought Marie Kondo in in the practice of like, does this feature bring us joy? Does this content bring us joy? Does this method bring us joy? So we were really thinking critically about what made sense for us. And there were ideas that we started with that didn't pan out. And we were like, okay, we don't need this. We focused on working on what was important first all the time. And what brought value. So I'm very mindful of people's time. So I wanted to make sure that we were working on things that mattered the whole time and not just like spinning on some ideas that as cool as they could be, because we had a ton of cool ideas. Like that's the thing about indie people. So many cool ideas. So many. It's crazy. But they weren't necessarily fitting what we were trying to do. So for me, it was always trying to bring them back to what is Season? Why are we making this? And so I think that was the best learning for me and for the rest of the team. So by the end of Season, I felt we were able to create a core team that could work effectively. We created production pipelines and an overall framework that I felt could work for the future. People that were our core audience for Season really loved Season. Unfortunately, it didn't sell as much as we wished they would. So there had to be decisions that were made, unfortunately, for the studio, for the project. But I still feel that Season is as a journalist mentioned it, a stepping stone for the industry in a different genre of games that we probably need more of, and we don't have enough.
Okay, we might have the ability to gather some interest in people which never heard about Season. Give us a quick overview. What is it?
Yeah.
Is it a narrative game? Like you like them, or
yeah, definitely. I mean, in my presentation, I kind of have a video showing the trailer, so it's kind of you can see it right away. But Season is a third-person atmospheric game. You, as a young woman, you're living a secluded village with your bike, and you're exploring the world around you. There's a hint of a cataclysm happening, so you live your village with your camera, with your recorder, and you set to record as much as you can from the world around you before this cataclysm happens. And it's really about you exploring the world, getting to know people, literally recording sounds in the world, wanting to be able to leave something for the next generations. You you have your own diary where you take in notes, you take Polaroid pictures, and you create. Every player can create their own customized journal. Where you keep your own version of the world that you just experienced, knowing that it's not for you, but it is for the generations to come. So it's definitely different from anything that I ever worked on before, but it was really close to my personal interests, and it felt like something that we needed, and that I really wanted to be part of. So I can even remember like some of the earlier playtests that we did where people were crying, experiencing the first scenes. It's a lot about emotion. It's a lot about self-discovery. And it's not a huge, super long experience, but rich enough to be able to make you feel the feels, basically.
How long is it?
Depends how you want to play it, but I want to say a good 6-7 hours of gameplay. I mean, some people got to 10 if they really wanted to interact with everything, but a good 7 hours will give you a good experience on season.
I think I would be the player with 10 hours, looking into every corner and exploring.
I'm a completionist too. Like I really try to. I guess it's my background in QA, right? I've just hit everything.
Yeah, sure. Testing the borders.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, let me go back here, even if I'm supposed to go that way and see if there's anything going on. Yeah, definitely.
I'm wondering if you have any idols or people that inspire you in the way you fulfill your role as a lead producer in season or in general. Are there any idols you have?
I have many. I think every person that I met in my career has taught me something. For sure, I was very lucky at the beginning of my career, especially at Ubisoft, to have a manager that really believed in me, Frédéric Fourny. Now she's the MD of .NOT in Montreal. We haven't spoken in a long time, but love you. She, like, I had a lot of opinions when I started in the career. I still have them today, but I was very opinionated. And she was the first person to encourage me into believing in myself as a person and as a manager, saying to me that I reminded her of herself when she was younger and in the industry, and she really wanted to make sure that I had the opportunity to grow into the role. Like, I guess she saw potential, and it really gave me the extra push that I needed to be able to get through my career so far. I still have imposter syndrome today. I think, especially women in the industry, but someone that doesn't come necessarily from a traditional game discipline like design or programming may not feel like they belong necessarily. And what I actually experienced was the opposite. I felt that there was always a place for me, and that, you know, there are a lot of wonderful people in the industry that can really lift you up, help you up. I try to do that as well as much as I can with the teams I work with and anybody in the industry that wants to start. So she was my first inspiration, but I mean, every person I met gave me something along the way that I carry with me and that I still refer to in all moments, good and bad moments. Even the bad experiences have been learnings for me. And I remember going through difficult productions where I was like, okay, this is not what I want to do. This is not how I want it to be. So it's never going to be like that again. And you know, it got me to really think critically about how we make games and why we do things in certain ways, and watching people lead other teams with care and kindness as being my go-to. So I try to do that as much as
I
possible.
think it's you take the most out of bad experiences and learnings from it, and so every bad experience you have in life is always something you can grow off.
Yeah,
and
it's a
become
learning
better.
opportunity for sure. But it's important not to minimize the bad experiences either. I think it's about accepting them, understanding them, and then let them go. So I always want to know how people feel about what they experienced, because I don't want them to feel like I dismissed their emotions about bad experiences, right? Like, bad experiences are bad. And we can say, we can find the better side of it, we can learn from it, which is great, and I think we should. But I think it's important to take a moment before to acknowledge that it has been a bad experience.
And to make a decision out of it, or to know how to handle them in the future.
Appreciate what you went through, learn from it, but also like letting it go, so that it doesn't decide or control how you act in the future.
So in the last, I think 40 minutes is it now, we get to know you a little bit better. One final question would focus on your future. Because we talked a little bit about your past, and now I want to talk about your future. If you had the chance to join as a lead producer any other AAA franchise, which one would you pick and why?
So right now, I actually, I very recently joined, the VR world, working on the next Alien game in VR, which is going to be a really scary experience. I really hope I can get it through it, because it is looking already super scary. So yeah, I don't know if I really want to work on an IP that I would love to personally experience myself. I mean, I did that with Season. I felt Season was the game that didn't exist in the market for us, and I wanted to be part of it. I wanted to participate in the developing of a game that meant something for me on the personal level. And I enjoyed that, but I also feel that a game that I really want to play, I want it to surprise me. I want it to be the first time that I'm experiencing a game. So looking behind the curtain and see how it's done and the whole complexity of it may take the magic away from it. I loved every project I made for different reasons. And I enjoyed it very much. But I think as a player, I really want to just enjoy the work of the team that made it and experience it as it's supposed to be experienced, which means as a fan.
All right. That was a great answer. It was a great interview. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much.
And I hope you enjoy your stay.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.